The flooding of New Londo is one of the strangest events in Dark Souls, and one of the most overlooked. In a world where threats are typically handled with war or political exile at a push, New Londo was very curiously flooded. A complicated solution if the goal was just to wipe out the city. Not to mention that this devastating act wasn't some last-minute decision. As we've discovered, the floodgates of New Londo were built during the city's construction, and they weren't unique. An identical structure was built for the neighbouring human town of Ulasil, likely with the same intention. Even at the height of the Age of Fire, with unparalleled military strength at his command, long before he left to kindle the first flame, Gwyn spent the time and effort to prepare, of all things, a flood. So the big question isn't just what happened in New Londo, or how the flooding was carried out, though of course we'll get to those as well. The big question is, why was a flood even needed in the first place? According to Ingward,
New Londo was sacrificed to contain the Dark Wraiths. The Dark Wraiths are the enemies of man and any living thing that has a soul.
But after everything we've learned so far, do you really believe that? Or is this just the story the gods wanted us to believe? We can hardly rely on Ingward's account. He's in league with Frampt, was directly involved in the flooding itself. His fellow sealers have left, and he isn't exactly the most informed source, or at least he acts that way. He doesn't seem to know Ulasil's true history, or even that Artorias is dead, despite the relevance to his work.
Long ago, the knight Artorias traversed the abyss. If you can find him and learn from him, the abyss may prove surmountable.
We'll come back to his role in the flood later, but for now, let's focus on the flood itself. And before that, a quick thank you to the sponsor for making this deep dive possible, ExpressVPN. I've used ExpressVPN for years now, especially when I'm working on videos like this while travelling. Public Wi-Fi is about as trustworthy as anything you'd find lurking in New Londo, so I keep ExpressVPN on whenever I'm researching. It encrypts and reroutes all my traffic through a secure server, meaning no one, not the cafe router, nor the internet provider, can see what I'm doing. Which is ideal, because research for Dark Souls videos can involve some very strange search terms. And it's genuinely useful beyond privacy. I use it to access shows and research material that aren't available in my region. ExpressVPN lets you change your online location with one click, which has saved me more than once when I needed to dig into region-locked interviews or just wanted to watch Lord of the Rings again. Find out how you can get up to 4 extra months by scanning the QR code on screen, clicking the link in the description below, or going to expressvpn.com/Hawkshaw. And just like traversing the abyss, make sure you're properly equipped. Alright, let's get back to New Londo. According to their armor set, the Dark Wraiths were once Knights of New Londo. The title of a knight reflects a high societal standing, not just strength in battle, which means they must have been established in the city for some time before its fall. Thus, New Londo having a form of military strength wasn't the issue, else the city would have been flooded many years earlier, well before Karth's influence. Instead, it must have been only their descent into dark that led to the decision to flood the city. On that point, Ingward's story holds up. But even with this knowledge, the current state of New Londo doesn't make sense. If the flood was unleashed to stop the Dark Wraiths, then why on our arrival is it everyone except those knights who are dead? The city's population now roam the ruins as ghosts, cursed beings that hint at the city's true fate. Yet the Dark Wraiths, and the Four Kings themselves, are perfectly intact when we meet them, dangerous as ever. The supposed target survived, while the rest of the city perished. So, was the flood a failure? I don't think it was. Listen carefully to the choice of wording whenever the flood is described. The Tin Banishment Catalyst says the sorcerers flooded New Londo to seal off away the Dark Wraiths and the kings who fell to dark. The key to the seal says the sealers banished them. The sealers' robes describe how the Flood's aim was to seal away. Ingward himself says the aim was to contain. And the mask of the sealer says how it symbolizes their resolve to keep the seal shut forever. New Londo's Flood wasn't a failure, because it was never meant to be a weapon. It was only meant to contain. Why else would Ingward still guard the ruins centuries later? How else would he know exactly where the Four Kings are, and that the Dark Wraiths still remain beneath the water?
The Four Kings slumber in the deepest chamber of the ruins. The Dark Wraiths reside in a dark void called the Abyss.
Ingward always knew that they would survive. The water wasn't expected to kill them. It was used as a last resort to contain them, a quarantine. So, that's why New Londo's floodgates existed from the start, and why Ulasil had them too. Flooding was a contingency to contain those who fell to dark. In other words, humans, specifically. Which raises two questions. Why does water counter humanity in this way? And if it's so effective, why don't we see floods anywhere else? Well, we may not hear of another flood, but we do see water's downstream effects on humans in the later games. In Dark Souls 2, there's the Holy Water Urn, said to be filled only with crystal clear water. Originally intended as a soothing potion, this water scalds the skin of undead and hollows. Already, we see a reverence towards water and a unique effect on humans. But it's only in Dark Souls 3 that water's role and its direct link to humanity truly comes to the surface. The deep. The name appears for the first time in Dark Souls 3, yet it takes centre stage across Lothric, the surrounding lands, even the Ringed City. What is it? Some think the Deep is the Abyss by another name. Others argue it's related to stagnant humanity. But whatever you believe, the game makes one thing clear. The Deep isn't just metaphorical. It is tied to water, literally, in both the English and the Japanese. Dregs, the power wielded by the Cathedral of the Deep's clergy, literally means the sediment left at the bottom of a liquid. Human dregs are said to sink, again, typically liquid language. Aldrich foresaw a coming age of the deep sea. Merkmen, animated by soul dregs, are said to rise from the depths, another word commonly tied to water. And if descriptions or dialogue weren't enough, the Merkmen designs make it crystal clear. Not only do they look like drowned corpses, but they are actually encrusted with marine life, barnacles, coral, growths that could only come from the sea. Taken together, it's undeniable. The deep, at least in part, is literally about water. And naturally, I think it's about deep water. In our world, the deep ocean is pitch black, cold, under crushing pressure, and it's eerily stable. A place where life behaves differently, where remnants drift down and gather for millennia. A peace untouched by the surface above. This is the imagery I think Dark Souls is invoking. The deep as a vast, silent body beneath the world. Something liquid, something real, which means it couldn't stay untouched forever. Like any body of water, it reflects what is poured into it. And the deep, what it reflects most clearly, is humanity and the dark. Once, long before the Ashen One arrives in Lothric, the deep was a peaceful place. But that all began to change when a group of clerics took notice. They marked the deep as sacred, as worthy of building or repurposing the Cathedral of the Deep, whose grandeur alone speaks to their reverence. The cathedral's placement was also important. It surrounds a large, deep body of water, another hint at the deep's connection to water. This pool, though easy to miss, is always nearby, close to the entrance bonfire, next to the cleansing chapel, and adjacent to the main hall too. From there, it seems like the water was carefully directed into the cathedral, feeding the shallow pools that fill the central hall, or even flowing through the mouths of numerous statues. But by the time we arrive, that sanctity has clearly collapsed. Deep protection gives context. The deep became the final rest for many abhorrent things. This tale offers protection for those who worship amidst these horrors. Deep Braille Divine Tome highlights that corruption directly. It teaches only 2 miracles after dark tales were added to its pages. One, deep protection, a vestige of the Khan deep. The other, Gnaw, a profane dark miracle that summons swarms of flesh-tearing insects. Thriving insects around water brings to mind a swamp, still pools teeming with life amid rot and decay. But the deep is no swamp. It is cold, lightless, almost barren. Insects were never native there. So something must have changed, warping the deep's peaceful nature into abhorrence. We could get lost in the details here, the cleansing chapel's blood rituals, the evangelist campaigns, or the cathedral's many corruptions, but ultimately, it all circles back to one infamous cleric, whose appetite poisoned the deep itself. Aldrich, Saint of the Deep. The ultimate embodiment of the cathedral's fall. Hawkwood puts it best.
Let's take Aldrich for one. A right and proper cleric. Only he developed a habit of devouring men. He ate so many that he bloated like a drowned pig, then softened into sludge. So they stuck him in the Cathedral of the Deep, and they made him a Lord of Cinder, not for virtue, but for might.
Even here, Hawkwood's imagery is aquatic, a drowned pig, sludge. With the deep, it always returns to water. And in the cathedral itself, we can see how these practices reshaped it. Festering bodies left by the water, clergy obsessed with dregs, miracles that swell from abhorrence. The deep wasn't just a holy site, it was a tool, a dumping ground for humanity, discarded as if it could simply be buried below the surface, the perfect tool to feed the gluttony of Aldrich. But humanity doesn't simply vanish in water, it sinks, as the human dregs description makes clear. And when enough sinks, it festers. Think of the whalefall phenomenon in our own world. When a whale sinks to the ocean floor, its carcass, a huge influx of food, erupts with life in an otherwise barren place. And this goes beyond mere scavengers. The downstream effect can last decades. Long after the flesh is gone, bacteria continue to break down bones, which in turn supports entire ecosystems that even include species that exist only around these whalefall biomes. That, I think, is the image FromSoft is invoking. Too many bodies sinking into the deep, until suddenly, the silence gives way to a hive of activity. And the cathedral makes that transformation clearly visible. You've no doubt noticed how some pools in the main hall have rotted like poisoned swamps, while others are pristine. But the only notable difference between them is that the festering waters are polluted with piles of corpses, where the clean water remains untouched. The dirtied waters are also overseen by giant slaves, which makes me wonder if their role is related to the processing of said corpses. And if the plumbing behind the statues really does draw from the reservoir outside, then the poison that now spills from them is a neat reflection of how the Deacons corrupted the deep itself. This defilement broke the deep's peace, and it became a hive of activity. I do wonder if this imbalance was ever avoidable once even a small amount of humanity settled in the deep. In Dark Souls, souls and humanity aren't passive, they're magnetic, drawn to life itself. The descriptions of homing soul mass, pursuers, black serpent, they all speak of this restless pull. So even though dregs sink, they aren't inert, they still reach for life. So perhaps the deep could never have been a truly eternal prison for humanity. Perhaps it was fate that the deep and the abyss would eventually be seen as the same thing, though we now know they were, at least once, distinct. The deep relates directly to water, where the abyss relates directly to humanity, as described in the first game, where Manus became the father of the abyss after his humanity was driven wild by Ulasil. Either way, the deep erupted with life. Dregs, insects, deep sorceries, and darkness beyond human ken, according to the Deep Gem. And it was this eruption of power that tempted the clergy away from their original interest in the deep. Many embraced the dark, others yet teeter on the edge, like this evangelist who looks out past the Deep Gem to the reservoir outside. The Deep Ring puts it well. In the cathedral slumber things most terrible, and as such, the Deacons require a grand narrative to ensure they do not falter in their duty, a philosophy to ward away the madness beckoned by the grotesqueries at hand. So, with everything we've learnt about the Deep and its relation to humanity, we can finally return to the Flood of New Londo with true clarity. Water doesn't kill humanity, but contains it. A deep flood makes for a natural prison for the dark, which sinks to the bottom, just as it did in Aldrich, becoming sludge, and just as it sank in the deep itself so many years later. While we don't see whole cities drowned elsewhere, we do see water used against humanity again and again. In Ulasil's gates, in holy water pots, the Cathedral of the Deep, and even in the Ringed City, where gluttonous locust preachers thrive in an abyssal swamp that mirrors the festering deep. And when Dark Souls 3 leans into this theme, it isn't introducing something new. It's picking up threads that were already there, just woven quietly into the first game. That's why New Londo's flood is called a sealing rather than a purging, why the Dark Wraiths and Four Kings still remain, and why the abyss itself hasn't washed away but simply waits beneath the water. And if you look closely, Dark Souls 1 was already blurring the line between humanity and liquid. Dark Orb wonders if a human soul is closer to matter in its humanity. The soul of Manus is described as viscous, a state between solid and liquid. Dark Souls 3 just takes those quiet ideas and places them at the centre. In the deep, the ringed city, the crystallization of dark, or the way the abyss sometimes overflows as pus, a liquid. Given this liquid nature of humanity, I think it's almost poetic how the community came to describe the two types of humanity in Dark Souls 1. Some call them soft or hard, but others say solid and liquid, where solid are the items you hold, and liquid means the number next to your health that you can use in the world, like liquid currency. Humanity was always more than just the power of dark. It's fluid, and it's heavy. Dare I say, maybe humanity's weight is why we can never swim. It's a fun theory, at least. And most fascinating of all, I think there's evidence that Gwyn himself knew of water's effect on humanity. The Cathedral of the Deep descends from the Way of White, according to the Archdeacon Holy Garb, the Church of Gwyn's own age. That suggests they already had some understanding of water's power, but there's an even clearer clue in Gwyn's Knights, a detail I could never make sense of. until now. In the DesignWorks interview, Miyazaki explained how much care went into the knight's creation, right down to the very patterns carved into their armour. He stressed how he really wanted that quality, even if it couldn't all translate into the game's graphics. So why then, of all things, do both the black and silver knight shields carry a flowing canal carved deep into its face? Not fire, not light, not even the sun, but water. For years that detail felt out of place to me, but maybe it wasn't strange at all. Maybe it was the biggest clue hiding in plain sight. Gwyn's greatest fear was humanity, those destined to inherit his world. So perhaps these designs weren't ornamental, but a practical reminder, a symbol of the one force that could counter the dark if all else failed. Flowing water, the means to sink humanity. The very same force that drowned New Londo. The mystery now is how. Even if water was Gwyn's failsafe, how is it actually carried out on such a scale? Where could the gods channel enough water from to drown the entire city? FromSoft are always exceptionally thoughtful with world design, and their use of water is no exception. The sewage of the depths runs off into the now poisonous Blighttown. The river networks between Ulasil in the past and Darkroot in the present also show a clear attention to the water's movements. This consideration was even discussed in the DesignWorks interview regarding the Firelink Shrine. It was originally designed as a water temple, but Satake and Miyazaki recall how this was updated through development. On the one hand, the lore of the world evolved to have kindling and fire at the forefront. On the other, there were literal, physical considerations too, such as Frampt appearing at the shrine, causing the pool of water to drain away. Now, of course, not every watery detail in the game has to have a perfect lore justification. This is a game after all. But given the importance of the Flood of New Londo, it's certainly worth speculating on. When considering where the flood's waters came from, the first thing you might think of is the river throughout Darkroot Garden, which borders New Londo. The river there is huge, and tumbles down a massive waterfall into Darkroot Basin. If we compare the area to Ulasil a few hundred years earlier, before the flood took place, things look very different. Back then, most water reaching the basin flowed from the opposite side, and the river itself was much smaller. For such a dramatic transformation to happen in only a few centuries is extraordinary. In our own world, you'd need severe climate change, major geological upheaval, or the melting of glaciers, and even then, all these would usually take much longer. Another possibility is human intervention to account for such a sudden surge in water flow. Or perhaps the river was always powerful, since its wide riverbed even in the DLC hints at a larger capacity than we see in Ulasil. The DLC is a unique moment in time, where the earth itself has fallen away, swallowed by the abyss. Perhaps this redirected the water's flow, and once the land mended, the natural flow of water returned. Personally, this makes the most sense. Either way, it's unlikely this river directly powered New Londo's flood for one main reason. It sits on the opposite side of the valley. And from collision data, you can more easily see how there's no path to channel it without spilling into the Valley of the Drakes, which, as we ourselves see, would empty the flood in an instant. Without a hidden aqueduct or cave system, the river alone doesn't solve the mystery. There are a couple of other, smaller possibilities too. The Hydra, for instance, is a new arrival since the DLC. It sits in a deep pool that wasn't there before, and its main attacks literally weaponize water. It's unlikely the Hydra caused the flood, but it does suggest that once the basin changed, new creatures adapted to, or were introduced into, the environment. and as one of the many remnants of Seath's influence in the area, its presence might not be coincidence. We'll return to that later. Another idea naturally arises when you look up in New Londo. There's a crack in the cave ceiling through which bright light spills onto the city. What if water was channeled through that? We can use the game's collision data again to more easily visualize this. Directly above the light in New Londo lands us just outside the part of the undead burg with the armoured boar. However, the cave ceiling lies about 50 meters below this greenery, and I've not been able to find any flowing water there, even when going out of bounds. Another dead end. Looking further afield, what other large water sources are there? Firelink Shrine doesn't have flowing water, just a still pool. There is the nearby aqueduct, but it's unclear what this connects from or to, even when looking out of bounds. There's the sewage of the depths, but like the previous ideas, there isn't a feasible route to channel the water to New Londo. The depths in the Firelink aqueduct do at least illustrate that water engineering is firmly established in Lordran though. Finally, there's the catacombs. Deep underground, a huge waterfall spills from the cave side, a powerful, flowing water source. So even though we are far from New Londo now, let's follow it. Moving upwards, we eventually arrive at the surface just outside Sen's fortress, below the secret bonfire. At first glance, that might seem unremarkable, but if you move around to the entrance bridge and look down below the tree line, you can actually spot a small stream. And it doesn't end there. Out of bounds, this stream continues, eventually connecting all the way to Anor Londo, the city of the gods. If this is the same stream feeding the catacombs waterfall, it certainly gathers enough volume on its journey to flood a city. And crucially, it lies on the same side of the Valley of the Drakes as New Londo, meaning the water could realistically reach its target. To me, this feels like the most plausible explanation. It links the human city with the city of the gods, and may even be the inspiration behind the flowing canal etched into the silver and black knight's shields. Perhaps this stream was the capital's secret weapon, kept in reserve for the day they needed to sink a human city. At some point in development, who knows what bigger plans they might have had for this humble waterway. We can't be certain, but it feels like the most fitting theory for how New Londo was flooded by the gods. But understanding how the flood worked is only part of the story. We can now see how the gods wielded water itself as a weapon to contain humanity. The scale and planning hints at the stakes for the gods themselves. Yet the full story is still out of reach. What did New Londo do to deserve such a fate? Was it really just the Dark Wraiths? Or did its people uncover something far older, far darker? Something the gods wanted to bury at any cost. If you made it this far, consider supporting the channel and get early access to upcoming releases, feature your own theories on the channel, or even get access to new Lore Before Bed videos ad-free for less than $1. Your support makes content like this possible, so thank you.